Let's jump straight into a story that turns pocket change into pure excitement. The humble nickel minted in 1971, an unassuming piece of metal that, in the hands of the right collector, can spark a rush of adrenaline. This particular nickel was born during a time of shifting designs and minting practices, yet it slipped under most people's radar, until error hunters and rarity chasers started finding treasures in their spare change. By the end of our time together today, you'll know exactly how to spot this elusive prize, why it captures collector imaginations, and what price tag it can command when it finally shows up in that old cigar box or dusty sock drawer. The story begins in Philadelphia in 1971, when the Jefferson nickel design entered its second decade. Robert A. Moore's portrait of Thomas Jefferson had replaced the wheat ears reverse back in 1938, and by the early 70s the foliage behind Monticello on the flip side was already a familiar sight. Yet nothing about the 1971 issue screamed rare. It followed the same production standards as previous years, with roughly 590 million struck at Philly and another 88 million proof coins at San Francisco. No Denver branch appears on the ledger that year, making P&S the only two players in town. Despite those vast mintage numbers, a handful of anomalies, microscopic die shifts and polishing strokes left behind by hurried technicians, would eventually elevate certain specimens from everyday pocket change to premium collectibles. Spotting the difference between a run-of-the-mill nickel and a sought-after variety takes a keen eye. The standout error for 1971 nickels is the full steps issue, catalogued as FS-101 and FS-102, sometimes even FS-103 when both devices overlap. On your standard nickel, the steps of Monticello's front porch appear softly defined, often worn smooth by wear. But on a full steps example, each of those 6 vertical risers is razor-sharp, with crisp lines that seem impossible on a coin struck by mid-century technology. To make things trickier, there's also a doubling phenomenon on some proof coins, where Jefferson's shoulder and the letters in Liberty bulge slightly outward. Rarity peaks when you find a proof coin bearing both full steps and doubling, a trifecta that can astonish even seasoned collectors. What really drives collectors wild is discovering one of these special nickels in circulated condition. A typical 1971 P nickel in good to very fine grades might fetch a dime or two from a dealer, barely more than face value. But a full steps die variety in high circulated grades, XF 40 to 58 Australian dollars, can climb into the $20 to $35 range, depending on how sharp those steps remain. In uncirculated mint state, prices jump dramatically. An MS-60 FS-102 might go for $60, while an MS-65 example routinely sells for $150 or more. Proof full steps nickels, particularly those with deep cameo contrast, regularly exceed $200 in pristine PR65 condition, and double die variations in PR67 plus can eclipse the $500 mark at auction. Digging into auction records reveals an even sharper picture of demand. In late 2023, a 1971 S-proof FS-901 double die obverse in PR68 deep cameo closed at just under $1,200 on an online bidding platform, more than double its estimate. Earlier that same year, a raw full steps MS-66 hit $275 in a small local auction, attracting bidders from across the country once images circulated on social media forums. For high-grade proof nickels exhibiting both types of errors, prices have broken the $2,000 barrier when slabs grade them at PR69 plus DCAM. These figures aren't outliers, they reflect a community of collectors keenly aware that once mint records are cross-referenced with surviving high-grade survivors, supply tightens dramatically. Beyond raw numbers, what makes the 1971 nickel story so compelling are the little anecdotes that surface when collectors swap tales. One hobbyist recounts finding a full step specimen while paying for groceries. The cashier handed him the nickel as change, and he noticed the detail while loading bags into his car. Another member of an online forum tracked down a bulk lot of unsearched bags from the early 2000s and uncovered 3 proof SF nickel doubles in the same roll, a find so rare it's practically legendary among error enthusiasts. Stories like these underscore how a coin struck for everyday commerce, destined to jingle in pockets and fountain machines, can turn into a prized centerpiece in a collection. Of course, condition is everything. A nickel with heavy circulation loses much of the luster that defines proof and mint state examples, but even well-worn full steps pieces carry value that dwarfs their plain counterparts. In circulated grades below VG10, the full step lines may blend into the fields, so verification under 5 times or higher magnification is crucial. Mid-grade coins, VF20 to EF45, with visible but softened steps still command $15 to $25, while about uncirculated pieces can push $40 to $50. As you approach uncirculated territory, MS60 and above, surface quality and strike definition become paramount. An MS63 FS 102 might be the gold standard for many, pulling $120 at dealer showcases, whereas MS65 coins can climb well into the $200s if the strike is deep and surfaces are blemish-free. Even among proofs, not all examples are created equal. Early proofs from the S Mint sometimes suffered from minor polishing lines on the fields, which diminish cameo contrast. A proof with moderate cameo, the contrast between frosted devices and mirrored fields, could go for $175 in PR65 DCAM. Ramp that up to PR67 Deep Cameo, and you're looking at $600 or more. Rare proof double dies in PR69 condition barely ever surface. When they do, they spark bidding wars that drive final prices well beyond retail values listed in standard guides. Those willing to chase registry set points often pay premiums, knowing these coins also carry bragging rights. Whether you're hunting pocket change or browsing dealer trays at a coin show, recognizing what sets a 1971 nickel apart can turn a routine purchase into a headline grabber. Keep that loop handy, study reference photos of full steps and doubling, and never discount a worn specimen. It might just hold the key to unlocking unexpected value. As we move on to our next featured nickel, hold on to these insights. The difference between face value and collector's treasure often lies in the tiniest of details, and the 1971 Jefferson nickel proves that even coins produced by the millions can hide stories waiting to be told. Sliding from the late 60s into the Eisenhower era, the 1959 Jefferson nickel carries a story of design transition and mint experimentation that has captivated collectors for decades. Struck just a year after the Jefferson portrait replaced the Roosevelt dime's half-century run, this nickel blended familiar imagery with newfound attention to detail. At a glance, it seems unremarkable, 5 cents in your palm, clad in copper nickel-clad steel core, but take a closer look, and you'll uncover quirks and varieties that can transform it from everyday pocket change into a highlight of a seasoned collection. The origin of the 1959 nickel points back to Philadelphia, where all business strike production took place. Denver didn't resume Jefferson nickels until 1968, and San Francisco confined its output to proofs. Roughly 146 million of these coins rolled off the presses at Philly, alongside about 5 million proofs struck at San Francisco. Despite those hefty numbers, the mint's polishing practices and occasional hub doubling left behind tiny anomalies that only sharp eyes or strong loops can pick out. Those anomalies, full steps on Monticello's rear stairs, double dies on the motto and date, and occasional misplaced mint grease spots, now define the rarest survivors. One of the most prized varieties is the full steps issue, catalogued FS 101 through FS 103, where all 6 steps of Monticello's portico exhibit razor-sharp definition. Full steps coins are uncommon because the mint didn't always pressure test the dies to ensure full metal flow into the step devices. When you spot a specimen with deep, crisp risers on those rear stairs, you've likely uncovered a full steps variety, which in circulated grades can command 5 to 10 times the value of a common nickel. Equally fascinating are the double die obverse examples. Some show clear doubling on Liberty and the date, creating a slight ghosting effect that jumps out under magnification. Values for these varieties depend heavily on condition. A typical, well-worn 1959 nickel without notable errors trades at or just above face value. Dealers often bundle them for 10 cents to 15 cents apiece. But a full steps piece in good grade might sell for $5 to $10, while examples in fine to very fine condition routinely bring $15 to $25. As you approach the about uncirculated AU threshold, prices spike, and $58 full steps can fetch $60, and an MS-60 specimen often starts at $75. Once you hit MS-63 and above, collectors chase the sharpest details and unblemished surfaces, pushing MS-65 coins past the $200 mark, with rare MS-67 examples selling for $500 or more at major auctions. Proof collectors also keep a keen eye on the 1959 S-proof nickel, where cameo contrast and surface purity elevate values. A standard PR65 cameo proof might go for $8 to $12, but deep cameo pieces in PR66 can reach $40 or more. Some proofs bear faint polishing lines or dye clashes near the rim, tiny indicators of the mint's cleaning and handling protocols. A proof that combines strong cameo contrast and absence of cleaning marks can trade hands for $100 in PR67, especially when slabbed and designated by PCGS or NGC with cameo or deep cameo descriptors. Auction records paint a vivid picture of demand. In late 2024, a PCGS MS65 full steps example sold for $320 at a dedicated coin show sale after spirited online bidding drove the final price 30% above estimate. That same auction featured a raw MS67 FS 102 specimen fetching $540, testament to the scarcity of high-grade survivors. On the proof side, an NGC-certified PR67 DCAM proof closed at $125 in a specialized collector forum sale, highlighting how registry enthusiasts prize cameo depth and flawless fields. Collectors love sharing tales of unexpected finds. One admirer of Jefferson nickels remembers a local bank teller handing over a neat roll of 50s nickels. Curiosity led to a quick inspection under a borrowed loupe, revealing two FS 103 examples, an astonishing 2% hit rate. Another story involves a dealer tray that sat unsearched at a Midwestern coin show until a veteran dealer flipped coins under bright lights, spotting ghostly doubling on a single 1959 obverse. That find fetched $180 in a private sale later that afternoon. Beyond errors, some collectors chase subtle mintmark positioning varieties. Though 1959 had no Denver mintmark on business strikes, proofs bear an S mark whose placement and size can vary slightly from coin to coin. Early proof shots sometimes exhibit off-center mintmarks or faint doubling on the S, adding another layer of intrigue. Specimens with perfectly centered, sharply struck mintmarks tend to command premiums of 20 to 30% over average proof values in similar grades. Condition remains king when it comes to value variations. In heavily circulated grades, good to VG, full steps coins bring modest premiums, often enough to catch a seasoned collector's eye, but not so high as to scare off bargain hunters. As you move into VF and EF grades, the interplay of luster and strike sharpness can turn a coin from a $20 purchase into a $40 prize, especially if light toning enhances the eye appeal. About uncirculated nickels, showing only light friction on high points, can excite buyers willing to pay $75 and up for a full steps example. Once in mint state territory, a coin's surface quality, luster orientation, cartwheel versus satiny, and strike depth become critical. Top-tier specimens in MS66 can fetch $350 to $450, with only a handful of MS67 nickels surviving, and those routinely exceed $600. Proof examples follow a similar scale, where cameo contrast and surface cleanliness dictate premiums. PR65 coins without significant cameo contrast might sell for $8 to $12, while PR66 DCAM examples start at $40. PR67 pieces with deep frosted devices and flawless mirrors tend to trade between $100 and $150, with rare PR68 examples, often slabbed with DCAM or Ultra Cameo labels, fetching $250 or more. Any hint of polishing or field hairlines can erode those values by half, so provenance and certification matter greatly. Specialized grading services have honed designations that help collectors and investors transact with confidence. PCGS, full steps, labels, and NGC, double die obverse, attributions reduce ambiguity, ensuring that a buyer knows exactly what they're bidding on. Registry competitions often drive prices even higher, as enthusiasts jockey for top spots in sets featuring 1959 nickels from PR 65 to MS 67. These competitive frameworks turn what might otherwise be a simple coin purchase into a strategic quest for both value and prestige. Whether you're peering through a loop in your den, scouring coin rolls at the bank, or chatting with dealers at a hobby show, keep in mind that the 1959 Jefferson nickel hides rewards for the observant eye. From razor-sharp full steps to ghostly double dies and cameo-rich proofs, the varieties and condition distinctions are where the real stories, and the real value, live. Armed with these insights, you'll be ready to spot that unassuming nickel and recognize when it transforms from mere currency into a standout gem worthy of any collection. Sliding seamlessly from one decade's nuances into the next, the 1970 Jefferson nickel takes center stage with its own blend of subtle design shifts and minting curiosities. Struck amid a period of rising metal costs and shifting mint techniques, this nickel quietly slipped into coin rolls yet managed to surprise those who know exactly what to look for. As you lean in with your loupe, you'll discover that this coin's story extends far beyond its face value. Each detail etched in steel and copper whispers a chapter of mid-century minting lore that can translate into real value once you crack its code. Back in 1970, the United States Mint continued to deploy Robert A. Moore's portrait of Jefferson on the obverse, but the reverse scene of Monticello was still undergoing microscopic tweaks. While the core design remained unchanged, subtle alterations in die polishing and hub doubling introduced variations collectors now chase eagerly. Production took place at Philadelphia and San Francisco, with no Denver Mint output that year. The Philadelphia facility turned out approximately 463 million business strikes, while San Francisco released around 5 million proofs. These numbers suggest abundance, but what lies beneath the surface of those numbers is a handful of prized anomalies that can be worth exponentially more than face value. One of the standout quirks for the 1970 issue is the double die obverse, catalogued in specialist guides as DD1 through DD4 depending on the doubling's intensity and location. On certain Philadelphia pieces, doubling appears along the rim from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock on the obverse, giving Jefferson's jawline a subtle echo effect. Other varieties display doubling on the date and motto, creating a ghost image effect that leaps out under 5 times magnification. Meanwhile, proof issues aren't immune. Some S-Mint proofs reveal a mirror-like field with dramatic cameo contrast but also unexpected die chips near the date dash, tiny flaws so small they require patient scrutiny to uncover. Identifying a genuine double die requires more than a glance. The key is to seek crisp, parallel lines on the letters and numbers rather than fuzzy mirror doubling caused by die deterioration. For instance, authentic doubling on the word Liberty in the 1970 P issue shows a distinct secondary strike protruding toward the rim, maintaining clear edges rather than bleeding into the surrounding field. Equally telling is the date itself. When you spot a perfectly replicated 0 trailing slightly behind the primary digit, you've likely found a true double die rather than post-mint damage. Proof pieces require an even steadier hand and dedicated lighting, angles that coax out the interplay between frosted devices and polished backgrounds, revealing both cameo depth and inconspicuous die flaws. Normal 1970 business strikes trade hands at modest premiums over face value when verified as error-free. In circulated grades, these coins might fetch 10 cents to 25 cents apiece if they preserve moderate luster and remain free of significant marks. Yet once a double die variety enters the picture, values surge. A VF20 double die obverse example can command $15 to $20, while pieces in EF40 to $58 Australian dollars condition often settle in the $30 to $50 range. Toning can further elevate prices. Softly iridescent surfaces in AU grade sometimes attract bids of $60 or more, as collectors prize aesthetically pleasing colorations. Even heavily worn examples, so long as the doubling remains discernible, can sell for $8 to $12, well above the face value they once held in circulation. Proof nickels from San Francisco bring their own premium structure. A standard issue proof in PR65 with no anomalies goes for around $5 to $10. Introduce a full cameo contrast, and that price tags along into the $25 to $35 corridor for PR65 deep cameo. But once die chips or doubling variants appear, the market reacts dramatically. Recent auction data shows that an S-proof bearing multiple small die chips and a faint secondary image on the rim sold for $120 in PR67 grade, nearly 6 times the going rate for a pristine non-error example. It takes patience to find and verify these specimens, but when one surfaces, eager bidders often drive the final price well above initial guides. Market records from the past 2 years underscore the demand. In mid-2024, a PCGS-certified MS63 double-die obverse P101 example sold at a major auction for $375, brandishing a strong strike in uncommonly clean surfaces. That same sale featured an MS66 specimen going under the hammer for $1,100 after spirited bidding. On the proof side, an S-Mint Cam PR68 example with minor die chips and exceptional contrast brought over $500 in an online series, setting a new benchmark for the variety. These numbers reflect a growing awareness among collectors. Once mint archives confirm production quantities, surviving high-grade survivors become more precious in proportion to the dwindling pool. Beyond the price tags, stories about accidental finds add a human touch. One collector recounts unearthing a 1970 P double die in a box of unsearched change from an estate sale, an unassuming stash of nickels sold for a few dollars at a garage sale, only for one to pull into focus under bright cabin lights. Another tale describes a coin dealer using specialized lighting to sort through a dealer tray, spotting the ghost image rim doubling on the very first nickel he checked that afternoon. Such accounts underscore an exciting truth: even coins minted in vast quantities can harbor surprises that thrill both novices and old hands alike. Condition plays an outsized role in value variations. In grades below VG8, the double die lines may blur into the field, making authentication a challenge without magnification. For grades VG10 to VF25, visible doubling starts to emerge, and values climb from single-digit premiums up to $20. From EF40 through 55 Australian dollars, collectors prize sharp device definition and minimal friction wear, qualities that can push values into the $30 to $60 range, depending on eye appeal and peripheral marks. Once you step into uncirculated territory, MS60 and above, surface quality, strike depth, and luster harmony determine premiums. An MS62 example of the double die obverse might sell for $125, while an MS65 with full cartwheel luster can crest $500 at auction. Proof nickels present a parallel scale focused more on cameo contrast and surface preservation. In the PR63 to PR65 range, a typical S-Mint cameo proof might fetch $15 to $25. Premium cameo pieces at PR67 or higher routinely command $100 to $200, especially when accompanied by die irregularities. The rared Cam PR68 proofs with crisp mirror fields and flawless frosted devices can climb well over $300. Varieties featuring proof doubling or minute die chips in PR66 Plus are prized by registry set collectors who chase points and bragging rights, often paying premiums that eclipse published values. Specialized grading services have refined how these coins are authenticated and valued. PCGS and NGC labels now specify not only grade and designation, e.g., double die obverse, but also the nature of cameo contrast and any die chips or spotting issues. This level of detail helps buyers and sellers transact with confidence. It also fuels registry competitions, where completing a set of certified 1970 double die nickels in all grades from PR65 to PR68 can become a multi-thousand-dollar ambition. Registry participants often network in online forums, swapping leads on undisclosed auctions or private sales where exceptional pieces might surface. As you absorb these details, remember that the difference between a common 1970 nickel and one that commands hundreds of dollars often boils down to a fraction of a millimeter on the die. So take your time, compare reference photos against actual specimens, and don't discount a nickel simply because it looks ordinary at first glance. Our final stop will unveil the story behind the 1959 nickel, a coin whose own set of quirks and values stands ready to surprise seasoned collectors and longtime enthusiasts alike.